When I was 13, I climbed my first mountain, a fairly modest 3,900-foot peak near where I live in Surrey, British Columbia. I was overweight at the time and out of breath when I peaked. But I loved the challenge of conquering something bigger than myself. I soon climbed almost 100 peaks. My parents were happy that I finally found a hobby. I often go climbing with my friend Mel who I met in a Facebook group. 2 years ago, on December 30th, when I was 16, she and I drove to Oregon to climb 11,240-foot Mount Hood. It is safer to start winter ascents at night when there is less risk of the sun melting the snow cover. That day we started at 3 a.m. on the trails along the slopes. The temperature was about 14 degrees and we were wearing layers that we could easily take off knowing the exertion would warm us up. We met 2 other climbers along the way and the 4 of us continued together. After about 5 hours we reached Devil's Kitchen, a plateau at about 10,000 feet, just before the final push to the summit. At that point the wind conditions were nasty. My exposed skin felt like it was on fire. The other climbers decided to go back, but Mel and I went ahead. We had ice axes, helmets and cleats. We were ready to climb. The path we followed was narrower and steeper. Around 9 a.m. we reached an ice patch called an ice step. It was about 3 or 4 feet tall and sloped at a 75-degree angle. I volunteered to go first. I put my left foot on the icy step. When you put the axe and crampons into it you get the feeling of ice and it felt good. Confident that I was safe, I put my full weight on it. Suddenly I heard a crack and a whole chunk of ice broke off from the step, right under my foot. I fell backwards in an instant. I heard Mel call my name as I fell down, bouncing off the rock face and rolling down the mountain like I was a character in a video game. I remember thinking, this is it. You are done. I stretched out my arms and legs and grabbed onto anything. This stopped my somersault down the mountain, but I was still sliding. After a few seconds, I stopped on a shallow slope just above the Devil's Kitchen. I fell 600 feet. My clothes were torn, my helmet was broken, and my face was covered in blood from cuts and scratches. I wanted to make sure I had all my powers, so I asked, "Where are you?" "Mount Hood." "What is the date?" "December 30th, good." My brain was not disturbed. I then scanned my body to see where I was injured, starting with my head, then my neck and arms. I was fine for the most part, except for a sharp, excruciating pain in my left leg. I later learned that I had broken my femur and that the bone was cutting into the skin and muscle. Strangely, when I touched my left foot, I couldn't feel anything, so I desperately tried to wiggle my toes. Luckily it worked, at least I knew I wasn't paralyzed. As Mel was coming down I shouted for help and other climbers came to my aid. Several of them were trained EMTs. They spiked my leg and called Portland Mountain Rescue. Mel stayed by my side as I tried not to cry out in pain. I lay on the ice, shaking and in agony for 4 hours before the paramedics got to me. They tied me to a sled and dragged me down the mountain. I have a pretty high pain tolerance, but every time I bounced, I screamed. At the bottom of Mount Hood I was loaded into an ambulance and taken to the hospital where I stayed for 4 days. The doctors told me it would be a year before I could climb again, but within 6 months I was back on the trails. The fall made me more careful. One slip on the mountain can change everything. But thanks to this experience, I also grew as a person. There was a lot of media attention after the accident. Strangers commented on the videos, called me vile names and said I would put others in danger. Some said I should go back to India. I think being able to handle all of this at such a young age helped me grow up. I have climbed another 60 mountains since that accident. I won't let one fall and its consequences stop me from doing my favorite thing in the world.